Hello students, welcome to our afternoon read aloud. Today we'll be enjoying part 2 of A Picture Book of Frederick Douglass. Now remember, when you're going to go back to a book, you want to review a little bit before you start up again to remind yourself of where the story was going. So I remember at the beginning it was about the very sad and harsh slave life he had growing up as a little kid. He didn't get to see his mom hardly at all. He had just really minimal clothing, ate cornmeal mush as a little kid. He heard, lots of sad, terrible things going on with the other enslaved people where he lived. Then things got a little better. He went to be the slave of this family where he took care of the little baby, and the wife was teaching him to read until the husband stopped it because it was not allowed. And remember how he was so determined to learn how to read. He knew that learning to read and teaching others to read was so important. And finally, he was able to escape. He was able to escape. Well, at first he was going to escape and somebody found out, so he was in jail. But then he was able to finally escape up to New York. And then he asked Anna Murray, the woman who had helped him escape, to come be his wife, and they settled in Massachusetts. But that was not all for Frederick Douglass. He still wanted to help others. So let's continue the story. Here we go. In New Bedford, Frederick worked loading and unloading ships, shoveling coal, and sweeping out chimneys. Frederick was pleased. He didn't have to share his wages with a slave owner. Wages are the money you make at your job. About 4 months after he came to New Bedford, Frederick began reading The Liberator, an anti-slavery newspaper. He wrote later, "My soul was set all on fire." In 1841, Frederick Douglass met the editor of the newspaper, William Lloyd Garrison. Garrison hired him to travel to other cities, talk about the horrors of slavery, and sell subscriptions to The Liberator. In 1845, his autobiography, The Narrative of the Life of Frederick Douglass, an American Slave, was published. In the book, he wrote his original name, Frederick Bailey, and the name of his master. This put Frederick in danger of being caught as a runaway slave, so he went to England. He gave speeches there, too, about the evils of slavery. So I got to stop and think. You have to remember that just running away and getting escaping, that was not enough because you could be brought back to your master. So that's why he felt when he was admitting his name that he needed to go to England to be safe. Frederick Douglass believed that people are not property to be owned by others. But still, in Baltimore, the Alds held papers proving that they did own him. Some friends in England bought those papers and his freedom. Now he could go home. Frederick Douglass returned to the United States in 1847. He moved to Rochester, New York, and started his own anti-slavery newspaper, the North Star. Later, it was renamed Frederick Douglass's Paper. Frederick spoke out against the racial prejudice he found in the northern states. He spoke out for women's rights. His house became a stop on the Underground Railroad, a series of safe houses for runaway slaves on their way further north to freedom. On April 12, 1861, the 4-year-long Civil War between the Northern Union Army and the Southern Confederate Army began. It was the war that ended slavery in the United States. In 1863, Frederick Douglass helped gather soldiers for the first black unit in the Union Army. 3 of his sons joined. But Frederick Douglass soon learned that black soldiers were paid much less than whites and were given poor equipment and little training. He told this to President Lincoln. The president told Frederick Douglass to be patient. Progress in the rights of African Americans would come slowly. Wow. I'm not sure I'd like to hear that answer when you're sending, these guys into war with not enough good equipment. Anyway, 8 months after the Confederate Army was defeated, the 13th Amendment to the United States Constitution was passed. Slavery was outlawed. In 1864, Abraham Lincoln was re-elected president. In March 1865, after the inauguration, Frederick Douglass went to the White House to shake the president's hand. At first, he was not allowed in because he was African American. President Lincoln had him shown in, and as he entered the hall, the president said, "Here comes my friend Douglass." Several weeks later, on April 14th, President Lincoln was shot. He died the next day. Frederick Douglass wrote 2 more books about his life, My Bondage and My Freedom, published in 1855, and The Life and Times of Frederick Douglass, published in 1881. In 1877, he was named Marshal, and in 1881, Recorder of Deeds for Washington, D.C. In 1889, he was named Consul General to Haiti. So he was so highly regarded that he worked for the government in doing some other big important jobs. In 1882, Anna Douglass died. 2 years later, Frederick married Helen Pitts, a white woman. Both blacks and whites were upset by the marriage. Helen Pitts told people that she had married the man she loved. Frederick Douglass told people that his first wife was black, like his mother, and his second was white, like his father. During his last years, Frederick Douglass spoke out against the mob violence and lynchings of African Americans in the South. He wrote that every Southern breeze was tainted and freighted with Negro blood. So after the war, even though the North won and slaves were supposed to be free, there was still a lot of bad actions and violence towards the newly freed slaves. Frederick Douglass had helped lead the struggle to end slavery. He had hoped to see blacks and whites throughout the United States living together in peace. He never did. On February 20th, 1895, after attending a meeting on women's rights, Frederick had a heart attack and died. He was 77 years old. When there's pictures of his other books, right? Okay, and there, instead of a timeline, they have a list of important dates. So, we got to do something at the end of the book, right? Do something. So, when I look back, I'm thinking I want to pay attention to this detail here, and I think this is interesting. You know, even back then, when there were many people in the North who had been against slavery and supported freedom for enslaved people and supported other things, you know, helping poor people, helping poor black families, things like that, still, the idea of mixing the races, of a black man and a white woman marrying, was still really considered not okay. And also even by black people. It's so interesting. And in fact, here in the state of Virginia, it was still against the law for blacks and whites to marry until not that long ago, until only about 40 years ago. So I think that's an interesting thing to consider. You know, now we think that it should be okay for everyone to be married, to love each other, to go to school together, to do all kinds of things together. But that was not the case until not that long ago in the state of Virginia. Well, we're making changes. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed our afternoon read aloud. Don't forget to keep washing your hands, cover your coughs and sneezes, do some reading, do some writing, help your family around the house, and I'll see you tomorrow. Bye.